a trophy.
Hello and welcome to just a snake bit version of Midlife Krisis as we finally get things going and moving here.
Don't let them know how the sausage is made.
Never,
Brian.
absolutely not. Everything's fine. Everything is fine, and you're going to be entertained, relentlessly entertained.
As always.
As always, I can assure you of that. So as you notice, frequenters of this fine program, we are in a new configuration, same location, same top secret, high action production facility.
This is our off the grid situation.
We're off the grid, just like the body.
Indeed.
The body. So anyway, before I even reveal what we're going to be talking about today, Uncle Bob, look, I understand fully, as you do, that the viewer out there, they've got a lot of options, okay? And I want to thank them personally for being a part of this program, being our viewership. So I want to reward them for their diligence and their their persistence in staying involved in this program.
They deserve a reward.
And they deserve a reward. So for the entire duration of maybe the next 4 to 5 episodes, I'm going to go ahead and play.
4 to 5.
I'm going to go ahead and play a Corey Haim tape called "Prayer of the Roller Boys." Special shout out, of course, to the one and only Prince Danny, member of the Suck Boys, an esteemed member of the Suck Boys. He deserves all the credit in the world for this. And I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I never even knew what Prayer of the Roller Boys was.
Yeah, I knew that you didn't know before
Yes.
Prince Danny showed you, and I could not believe that to be true.
Makes two of us, friend. A couple peas in a pod there, no doubt about it. But look, the course has been corrected. So for you out there, our loyal fan base, if you get bored of us yammering on about stuff that we more or less don't know what we're talking about, just go ahead and look at that tiny little postage stamp size screen in the background playing consistently.
Watch some cinema magic.
Some cinema magic. Corey Haim rollerblading. And, of course, the volume will be turned all the way down. And no, Uncle Bob, we do not have to worry about copyright issues because
fair enough.
I bootleg this myself off of YouTube. So let's go ahead and pop this in. Just like so. There we go. Oh, no. Oh, God. It's fine.
The technology is so complicated.
Everything's going to be fine. Look, I want to point out this is probably the most state-of-the-art home theater system setup that you're going to find anywhere.
1989's finest.
Absolutely. Look, how else would you want to watch Prayer of the Roller Boys other than a fine piece of technology right here? So that's going to be going on the entire time. But today, Uncle Bob, we're going to be talking about the state of the video game industry. There's a lot of doom and gloom out there.
And thank God we've got this magic on video right now because it's the perfect yin to the yang that we're going to be.
Well, it's like if you think of the games industry right now as headed towards like an apocalyptic disaster. Yeah. Right here, Prayer of the Roller Boys, they're already there. They're already there, and they figured out a way to correct course, and that is through the art of rollerblading.
And they make it fun and interesting.
They make it
exciting.
fun and interesting and exciting. Thank you very much. They also do a made-up drug in the movie a bunch, and I'm not saying Xbox is doing that, but I'm not saying that either. So anyway, yeah, there's a bunch of doom and gloom out there right about now. About
a lot
the
of bad
industry.
news recently.
A lot of bad news recently. Yes. Yeah. So we're gonna do this in 2 parts. We're gonna talk about Microsoft and Xbox here now, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about Sony and PlayStation because I think that they're screwing up in different ways.
Definitely.
Yeah. But what's important to know is that they are screwing up. So
also true.
Yeah. And so let's get right into it, Uncle Bob. Where are you coming from with all of this stuff? When we talk about Microsoft and Xbox, let's start there. When that thing came out in 2020 versus now, and the course that it's been on. Go nuts, pal.
So I feel like I bring a kind of an interesting perspective to the table because I was not a Sony guy and I was not a Microsoft guy, at least in the console space. I was always a PC guy, and then when I was a kid, I was a Nintendo guy. So in 2020, PS5 comes out, the Series X comes out. They come out within 48 hours of each other.
Yep.
I get both, and I had no loyalties. I was just going to play them both, and just whatever happens, happens. And I started playing Gears Tactics on the Xbox, and I started playing some of the Sony exclusives I had been missing out on. And pretty quickly, I was gravitating towards Sony. Mm-hmm. And then over the course of the next year, I played through 10 years of Sony first-person games, and they were all great.
Right.
And during that time, I'm waiting around for Microsoft to release an exclusive that might kind of catch my attention, and they just could not do it. They had Game Pass, which is great, but a lot of the Game Pass games I already had on my PC.
Yeah.
Or I could just play them through Game Pass on my PC. So I was waiting for the console, the great console game. And the first one that was supposed to be slightly better on Xbox than Sony was Cyberpunk 2077.
Yep.
So I bought it on Xbox thinking like, okay, finally I'll now get one game that'll be better than on Sony. And then that launch you may have heard was an abject disaster.
little dodgy.
So I stopped. I did not play it because I was going to wait for them to fix it, which took like 2 calendar years for them to do. And so since then, it's just been some bad news, like one bad news story after another. And then in the last 12 months have been particularly bad for the Microsoft brand because the Redfall failed miserably. Starfield was kind of a disappointment. They really don't have any great exclusives other than Hi-Fi Rush. And then they just did this recent announcement that I think you're going to talk about a couple weeks ago that had everybody on social media believing, even I started to believe this, that Microsoft might be exiting the console market altogether.
Yeah.
And that was about as doom and gloom as it gets. So.
And it was also for those of us that lived through the Dreamcast. It
what I was
kind
thinking
of
of.
felt a little seasoned in that.
Yeah.
vein. So okay. As you know, I started this generation out on the Xbox and not the PlayStation. So for me, like I had ever since the PS2, I've been on that train, and so I had expectations of like I knew that the PlayStation 5 was going to be something that I was going to get. Like it was just a matter of time. But because I totally skipped out on the Xbox One, I kind of wanted to try something different a little bit. Are you going to join us, little buddy? Here he comes.
This can only go well.
This is going to go well. Let's find out. So we have a special guest.
Oh, God.
Here we go.
It's happening. It's happening.
That was fantastic. He'll be back. He'll be back to torment you. So anyway, when it comes to me having the Series X, like I thought it was a wise investment because we have similar experiences. You didn't get you didn't have a PS4 or 3 or 2 for that matter. But I skipped Xbox One, so it's like, well, there's at least a handful of games like the new Killer Instinct I wanted to check out. Sunset Overdrive was something I wanted to check out that I didn't have access to. So there was a reason for me to do it. And I'll say the first year of Series X, like I wasn't disappointed at all personally, because I got in. My first game was Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Right.
So that was the timed exclusive on Xbox. So that gave me like 100 hours right there, right out of the box.
That's
100 hours to go.
Good chunk in the middle of COVID.
In the middle of COVID, so that worked out nicely. And then as you went on, like it basically was like a big build up to and the other big one too is Forza Horizon 4.
Oh yeah.
Which at that time, in my opinion, and I think a lot of other people's opinion, like that was the most next gen looking game that you can play at that time. Yeah. And again, going back to what you were talking about, like on paper when they announced these two systems, the Xbox, all the specs were higher on the Xbox. So then it was kind of weird to see when the launches did happen, games are typically running better on PS5, which that was kind of almost like foreshadowing of like where this was kind of this was going to head. Yeah. But so I thought Game Pass was great. I still think Game Pass is great. I think we've talked about this on the show before, but like I try to find excuses to use my Xbox to play games and not just be like a media streaming device. Yeah. But it's hard not to say like I'm disappointed. For me, the high point was Halo Infinite. I loved the single player campaign. All the shit with the grappling hook was genius. Like it's a genuinely good first person shooter and like a good example of Halo. One of the things that I did when the Series X first came out was I played through the entire Halo series, which is something I never really did. Like I checked out Halo 1 when it first came out. I don't think I ever played Halo 2 at all, ever. And then Halo 3 is the only one that I played and beat because it came with the 360 that I bought. But then I never played 4 or 5, none of that stuff. So like that was kind of fun to catch up with that whole series and like really see why it is such a beloved and talked about thing. But it did all lead up to Halo Infinite, and that first season, I'll tell you this, Prince Dan and I, we played that game online a lot, and it was so much fun. That first season was such a good time, and I've heard that they've gotten it back on track, that a lot of people are playing Halo Infinite again, which is cool. But that's after like 2 months of like just a lull of no one playing it.
Yeah, it might be too little too late.
Yeah, exactly. So who knows where we are with that? But like you brought it, like the Redfalls of the world, the Starfields of the world. Like every time they have this game where they're like spending promotional money on it and they're trying to say like, yeah, this is one of ours.
Yeah.
Like it's just shit the bed. And then now it feels like they've gotten to the point where they're just resigned. And like that's the general feeling I get with Xbox is just kind of like, we might as well put Hi-Fi Rush out on PlayStation and make some hot dog money or something.
Get something out of it. Because that's a really good game by all accounts.
Yeah, I loved it. It's probably my pound for pound my favorite Xbox game right now.
Right. So the thing is, like, Sony's got so many great franchises, and they have not had many disappointments with their major franchises. Ratchet and Clank and God of War and Spider-Man. It's like those three alone are just worth their weight in gold. And Microsoft is not been able to match that. And if you just look at the number of studios that each console maker owns, it's actually comparable. It's just that the Sony studios put out games that are worth buying and playing, and the Microsoft studios haven't. We'll see how the Activision deal shakes out, but even before then, it's like they own the entities and the IPs. It's just the games themselves have not been worth what the Sony games are worth.
Well, even that, and we'll talk more about this when we get to Sony, but like I feel like there was like this like ships passing in the night kind of problem with both things, where like for a while now Xbox has had this problem where there's just not games on their system.
Yeah.
PlayStation is now entering that phase themselves, where like that's one of the things that we'll talk about when we get there, is that apparently there isn't a major first party game that's coming out in all of 2024, which is nuts. Like just absolutely bonkers
for all those studios that they own.
Yeah, and so, but to your point, getting back to Microsoft, like they spent so much time acquiring companies and doing like business stuff, like doing the back end business
time
stuff,
and money,
doing that, and then the time and money that they had in active development hasn't been very fruitful, with the exception of like a tiny little like slate of offerings that they've put out.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit more about how where you thought Xbox was going to be 4 years after the launch, and to where it actually is.
So there was a showcase or a direct or whatever Microsoft calls or reveals.
Was that the one that we covered here and we were super excited?
Yes.
And it did Fable
and there's a new Fable is like the kind of the headliner, and that was, I think, almost a year ago now.
Something like that. It was close to it.
And those games haven't come out.
Right.
And some of them, like, I haven't even heard any updates on the Fable game, so who the hell knows what's going on with that. So that combined with, again, when you see that the studios that they own, you're just, can you guys put a franchise out there? Just something. We want to like your system. We are not slaves to the console wars. We're not beholden to any entity. Just give us a reason to buy Microsoft products. And also, I want you to compete with Sony, because that's going to make both manufacturers better.
Yeah.
And so far, man, they just haven't done it. So where I thought it was going to be was it was like they're both getting off on the same foot. It's COVID, so they both had the same supply chain issues initially, which kind of bottlenecked the initial install base.
Seemed to last a little longer for PlayStation than it did Xbox.
Definitely. So there was an opportunity there as well. And there was a real opportunity, because since Microsoft owns Bethesda, there was tons and tons of hype for Starfield, minimally. And it was manufactured hype, but Redfall as well. It was like, okay, so now Microsoft is going to have some franchises that are able to rival Sony, and then they have Game Pass on top of that, which continues to be the best value in gaming, and in my opinion runs circles around Sony's online offering. So it's like this could be like a real even fight, and then it just didn't turn into that. Yeah,
but it's almost like it's turning into it now, because like they're now both Sony and Microsoft are experiencing like a simultaneous dearth of crap. So it's like, but with Microsoft, at the beginning when this thing first came out, like I was wowed by what was promised in terms of like the technical specs of it.
Yeah, I
think everyone expected all of the games to be 4K 60, because that was like such a big thing about the. I mean, people were buying. I'm in this club. Like, I bought a new TV for these systems, expecting 4K 60 and at times 4K 120. And as we went deeper into the weeds with these things, it just never really happened. Like, you have a couple games here and there that take full advantages of what the systems can do, but on the Xbox, it seems like there's less. And I might be just pulling that out of my butt, and that's fine. But like, it just feels that way. And something that you mentioned earlier that I want to touch on too, as it relates to Microsoft. But so I've always been, well, as long as I've had the resources, I should say, I've always been like platform agnostic. Like I have never bought into like Sega's better than Nintendo or Nintendo's better than Sega. There are certainly things that Nintendo was better than Sega at, and vice versa. But like they could coexist in my world, and it's always been that way for me. So one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting to see on the internet was like, and honestly, this took me by surprise. Like the amount of fervor and like hate and toxicity that came out of Xbox's fan base of being mad at the notion of like, them releasing games on other things, all the while Minecraft has been a thing for like 15 years or whatever. That kind of took me by surprise, and the reason why it took me by surprise, to be honest with you, is because I didn't think people gave a shit still. I just did. I genuinely didn't think. I thought that, and here's the deal. Like the Xbox One really, they're still in damage control mode from that. Like still, the Xbox One was like, if you talk to people years after that thing launched, people still had the idea that like you had to always be connected online for your games to work and all this stuff. There was so much damage done at the beginning of Xbox One. And then plus you have to look at it from the standpoint of like the 360 was far and away that generation's pack leader, like far and away. A lot of franchises that that gaming enjoys today, you Call of Duties, all of that stuff, like the big giant games, they were all on the 360 and thrived on the 360, and that was the platform that people developed for first. Because the PS3 had several challenging years in the beginning just based on the hardware of that thing. Whereas the 360 was just like, yeah, we're PC, go to town, guys, and they did, and that's why it was really like from going from the original Xbox to the 360. Like it really showed what they're capable of. And
in contrast, Sony going from the PS2 to the PS3, the PS2, which had an almost monopoly over that generation, it really brought parity, so that the PS3 and the Xbox 360 by the end of the generation were close, which was remarkable to say, because for them to be close, it cost Sony a significant percentage of the install base, and Microsoft had to double or triple their percentage to actually get to parity, but they managed to pull that off. So that going into the Xbox One generation, they were on basically even footing.
And then what's his name? Jay Allard. I think it was Jay Allard, the CEO at the time, the guy who came out. It's an infamous press conference that like by now I think anyone who's watching this show is at least aware of, if not watched it. But that's when he infamously went out. No, sorry, it was Don Matrick. I got my rich assholes mixed up. It was Don Matrick. He was the CEO, or not CEO of Xbox, but in charge of Xbox at the time. And he was the one that really spearheaded all this gobbledygook of like having 2 HDMI ports, and like people were going to plug their cable TV, which is so cute to say, their cable TV was going to go in the Xbox One so that you could like play a game and watch your cable at the same time. And no one wanted that shit. And so they're still in damage control from that. And it looked like at the beginning of this thing that like, wow, they really fixed their situation. Game Pass is awesome. Here's all these promising games coming. And then just like one after the other, like just bad thing after bad thing after bad thing that happened to them. So it's like, it's kind of, I feel I have empathy for them, because like it's clear that they've been trying, and I want to like their shit. It's just that there's not a whole bunch of stuff to like about them right now.
They have a console with great specs, had great specs out the door, and then they have a service, a Game Pass service, that is a tremendous value. So those are two really important pillars. But the most important pillar in succeeding in any console generation is having great games. And they just don't have the kinds of games that compel people to go out and buy Xboxes. Not when most of the best games on Xbox are also available on PC, or even sometimes available on PlayStation, and now will increasingly be available on PlayStation because of the recent decision making that they did. So I don't know. What do you think? So a lot of the decision for us to do this topic was spurred by what happened a couple weeks ago. So if anybody doesn't know, Microsoft laid off a whole bunch of people. That's his own story. And then then there were rumors about it making first-party exclusive games available on other consoles. And then that spurred people to think, well, God, you can get your Xbox games, previously exclusive Xbox games, on other consoles like Sony, which are selling better. Why would anybody go out and buy an Xbox? Oh, God, maybe Microsoft is going to leave the console industry altogether.
Yeah.
And how bad would that be? And then it got to the point where Microsoft, which had planned to do this announcement a couple months from now, had to sort of rush it, and they did this incredibly awkward
podcast.
Yeah, podcast talk thing where they just tried to clear the air and reassure people.
They announced hardware on that thing. Like that's how much they felt they needed to do damage control, was to be like, oh, there's another Xbox coming.
Yeah, we're still going to make hardware.
And it's going to be really good.
Yeah.
It's going to like travel through time and shit.
Yeah, so they did at least manage to stop the bleeding there. But man, at the end of it, it's still like, okay, well, you guys own Activision and you own Blizzard now and you own Bethesda now.
Yeah.
So can you just put out a good game? Can you just please just put out a good game?
So here's something I wanted to talk about, and maybe it fits here and in the Sony discussion, but both, because it really kind of boils down to modern gaming. But since we're on Xbox, let's talk about it. So Blizzard, and so they bought Activision and Blizzard. They own Bethesda. They some of the smaller ones like Ninja Theory, all these other things. Yeah. Here's an issue that I have with all of that stuff. So we've seen some of the fruits of Bethesda's labors, which was Starfield. Which, like, I tried to play Starfield, and right around the time when the game like asked me to play it like a shooter is when I stopped playing it, because it sucked. All of Bethesda's games that included shooting, in my opinion, so your Fallouts, they don't feel good to play. They feel like bad shooters. They feel like they're games that weren't designed to have shooting, but yet it's tacked on. So that's in one little box here. Now, you know how I feel about Activision and Blizzard. It's not that big of a deal. Like, to be honest with you, I care more about Activision than I do about Blizzard. But
how dare you?
Well, I'm sorry, it's the facts. But like like Call of Duty has been really rote and boring for like 8 years, 10 years now.
Which is so funny because the entire fight over Sony trying to stop Microsoft from buying Activision was over Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Which, and we'll just put our monocles on for a second, which real gamers I don't give a shit about at all. I know it sells a bajillion units every year, but in terms of pushing the industry forward and interesting
and it's kind of been on, and it's been its own thing for years.
Yeah.
But my point with that is that, so Call of Duty 4 came out, completely changed like everything we know about multiplayer first-person shooters.
Right.
Even the single player campaign in that game was like, I mean, it's not like super duper memorable, but they did a good job. Like, and it was a fun thing to do. Then little by little starts to get, the quality diminishes.
Yeah.
And so, fast forward all these years later, like look, dude, I really don't care about Assassin's Creed. I don't give a shit about Call of Duty anymore. I don't give a shit about so many of these, like what were former like big tentpole franchises,
right?
Because like there isn't any innovation anymore. Like it's all the same except for now, oh, here's better lighting and here's higher resolution. Like I really feel, and we did an episode not that long ago we were talking about our favorite eras in video games.
Yeah.
And the genre or the era that I picked was the PS2, GameCube, Xbox era. And the main reason, there was a lot of reasons why I picked it, but the main one was this really fertile creative time where developers were taking a lot of risks and just trying to see what would happen. And they were at a point where technologically they had figured out more or less how to make 3D games now finally. And so with that in the pocket, they could go out and like start to like explore other things about video games. And I just really feel in general between Xbox and PlayStation that it's almost at an all-time low creatively. So at the top, at the AAA
right.
level.
So you had cited Elden Ring as I think the only game that feels.
Oh, buddy, I'll go on record here.
Okay.
Elden Ring is the only game that's come out in this generation, PS5, Xbox Series X, that wall to wall blew me away, wall to wall. And there's no other game that's come out on these two systems that even comes close. So, and that's obviously taste being subjective. But
I should really get around to playing.
You'll get it'll happen sooner or later. You'll find 175 hours that you can devote.
DLC coming out. In June.
Yeah, see, now you have an excuse to get ready for it. You really should play that game. Yes.
But you didn't think Cyberpunk when you played it you didn't have any of the technical problems, but you didn't think that was innovative?
No, I thought some of it was a little innovative, I guess, but my problem with Cyberpunk was that it didn't there was a wow factor, I think, visually, and certainly like as a fan of things that of that aesthetic of Cyberpunk aesthetic, it definitely delivers. And I had a good time with it overall, but it was just it was like a Bethesda game. It was like a big Western RPG.
Yeah.
My problem with Cyberpunk was that like it gets to a point and too early in the game where it doesn't matter what you do anymore. Like you get strong enough to a point where like you just obliterate anything you want. And then here's a common complaint I have with like a lot of games that have come out in the last 5 years is it's a very rinse and repeat type of a thing. So you have like a handful of different mission styles, and you just do them over and over again, and you kind of bump the plot along, and it's just more of the same, more of the same, more of the same. And I'm not going to sit here and like try to say like there's plenty of things wrong with old games when you go back to examine that stuff, as I like to do, and there's certainly a lot to be said about like quality of life improvements that have happened with the progress of game design in general. But like for me and my taste in particular, like I love video games. I mean, look at this shit. Like I love arcade games. Like I like video games. And I think that like that still exists, obviously. Like there are things that are video gamey, but I think in the last decade plus, like the emphasis in telling stories and trying to be as cinematic as possible, I think like we've kind of lost a little bit of that. We've lost a little bit of the video game whatever that means, like where I'm just playing a game to play it, to like showcase my skill, to chase a high score, whatever it is. Something that carried along this medium for years and years and years. Sure. And now it's like almost like that's something that's forgotten about. And it's one of the reasons why I like Nintendo so much, is because they do focus a lot of time and energy on making their games fun to play and innovative. It's my game of the year last year is Mario Wonder.
Yep.
And it took a 2D Mario game that we've all known for like 40 fucking years, and it did just enough to innovate, to turn some ideas on its head and create something that really did feel genuinely new, but also at the same time like something comforting and fun and nostalgic. So like I think video game development or design, whatever you want to call it, is also partly to blame for where Xbox and Sony are right now.
That's interesting.
Yes.
I don't know how to react to that, because I didn't think that was one of the things that you were going to say.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion too, is it's not just about these giant monolithic companies shitting the bed. I think it's overall the medium is kind of shitting the bed right now. And again, I want to emphasize this, at the highest levels. I still think there's a lot of innovation going on at the indie level, which that's an upcoming conversation we're going to have.
Sneak preview.
About what constitutes indie and why I hate some of them. But so no,
it's great, Brian. You hate the AAA games at the high level, and you hate some of the indie games at the low level.
Yes. Well, and okay, look, hate is certainly a strong word. I'm bored by them. Is I think more of a an accurate descriptor. I'm bored. I'm less interested. that's something, an overall thing that I want to talk about today too. Like, I do feel less interested in video game in general. Where video games are now, I feel less interested in them than I have maybe ever before. It feels like a very low point right now.
Oh man, that's
sad. Let's we've brought this up on the show so many times, but since it's one of the main differences between you and I, like you have that big gap where you didn't do much other than play WoW.
Yeah.
For me, I've never gotten off the console game train, so like I feel like I've kind of seen it all happen. I do want to get your take on that, like, because for me, like I was saying, like because I've been through all the genres and have participated in this wacky race. So that's why I feel the way that I do, is I feel like some of the more creative pockets of time are behind us now. I'm not saying we can't get it back, but right now it just feels like we've plateaued.
So just go make a WoW account.
Okay.
Play for the next 5 years.
Got it.
Then come back and check in with everything else, and you'll find all this stuff that's been made.
Okay.
For you to catch up with. I actually am very, very, very happy with how gaming is right now. I don't care at all that Sony isn't releasing another first-party game for a year, because it's like, great, I'm going through Alan Wake 2 right now.
Yeah. But try to take yourself, and I get where you're coming from, obviously, because you're in a unique position. You have so much stuff for you to go and play.
Yeah.
But if you can try to remove yourself, let's pretend, and I know this is impossible, but pretend that you have kept up with things all these years, or maybe just because I know you played a lot of these big games on PC because Steam, right?
Definitely.
So do you not feel the same way that I do? Like, do you feel like that right now it's actually things are going well? Like things are coming out that are interesting and creative at the highest level?
Yes. And I say that in part because I just played the Talos Principle and Baldur's Gate 3, which I thought...
Talos Principle is not the highest level. We know that.
Well, it's not a
Baldur's Gate 3,
game.
Baldur's Gate 3 I'll give you is obviously a big deal.
Sure. And right now I'm playing Alan Wake 2, which I think is actually really, really innovative. I'm incredibly happy with how that's going, even if it terrifies me every time I turn my console on.
Adorable.
So it's really a difficult task to get through that game, but the things that it does well, it does really, really, really well. And I wouldn't normally play a horror game, but this one was reviewed so well, I thought I would give it a try, and I'm glad that I did. I will say that to the extent that you see a game, and I don't want to talk about Sony too much, but like Spider-Man 2 would be the go-to example.
Yeah.
Where it's like when I played that game, when I played the first two, Spider-Man and then Miles Morales, that felt really, really fun and interesting. And Spider-Man 2 is good. It's got a good story. It was in my top 5 last year. But it didn't feel... That's the closest I think I can come to relating to this feeling that you have where it's like, it's not bad. It's just, it's not innovative. Yeah. And it's not creative in a way that I haven't seen before. But I also play a ton of games in the indie space, and I really do think that there's a ton of creativity going on there. So I do actually sort of empathize with you a little bit. I can separate myself to say that I'm not experiencing what you're experiencing, because when I just look at my backlog, I still like get stressed out from it. Stressed out to the point that when I hear that there's not going to be first party Sony games coming out for a year, I'm like,
you're excited.
Cool, great.
You're like you're the only guy who's
yeah,
pumped.
I'll check back in with you guys in a year. I got plenty to do until then.
Right.
That's just kind of where I'm at. But I do, if I just think of that one limited example of how I felt playing Spider-Man 2, or a lot of the so-called Sony formula, where it's like it's a first person, it's an open world, there's side missions, it's all that stuff. That feels like it's been done enough now that I'm not sure when the next time I'm going to play a game.
Well, and you know what? Even so, going back to Elden Ring and why I love that game so much, like really at the end of the day, Elden Ring is a Souls game, but it's just like a Souls game that's been injected with a lot of money and artistry and people. Yeah. And so it's kind of like an unleashed project that's been built up over a lot of game releases. And it's almost like we started with Demon Souls and all this time and money and stuff has been put in it. And here's the fruit of all that stuff. And that's why Elden Ring is so good. But even Elden Ring is a Souls game. Like I've played all those games. So like for me, like I've been there, done that. It innovates in different ways.
Yeah.
But it's really more of like the feeling I get from that game is more of just like the astonishment of it, of like how much and how much scale and how cool and all that stuff, all that shit goes.
And you expect more of that, and it's
Yeah.
it's a reasonable expectation to have. Oh, this is actually, I wanted to bring this up. Oh, I'm going to set up for this next part. All right.
Here we go.
Okay, hold on.
Oh,
Hold on.
move that old body.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, let's check in with Corey.
How we doing, Corey?
It's
That's Corey's. That's his shitty little brother who keeps getting in trouble.
so dark. It's so dark.
Well, I haven't. It's dark on purpose. I could try to adjust it.
All right.
How does that? There's Corey. There he is.
Corey.
I didn't want it to be too bright
That's
because
fine.
it would be a laser beam destroying what we're trying to craft here.
The people want to see Corey.
Well, I didn't put him on for nothing, so you're right. And
All
this,
right.
what great timing to get him on
It
there.
really was. So. Okay, so here's the thing. I wanted to build a bridge with you.
Yeah.
We did an episode recently on Kojima,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and we talked a lot about Death Stranding. And in that, my review of the game, I was fairly critical of it, and I was fairly critical of it as I was playing it. And it was mostly an expectations game. After that, I went back and I watched the 10-minute trailer that came out recently, like 2 more, maybe even 3 more times. And then I started reading the Reddit forum on it. I'm actually genuinely excited for Death Stranding 2 now.
Yeah, me too.
Like, really looking forward to
Yeah.
it in a way that I didn't expect. And maybe it's just a slow burn. Maybe it's just that my psyche is finally aligned with what this game is versus what I thought that it would be. Or maybe, to tie this all together, it's that you're looking for innovation in a space and there's not a ton of it happening right now. And as to use the word that you used, the auteur, Kojima,
Yes.
is actually trying to do things to move the genre forward,
Yeah.
and you can be excited about that. So 2025, Brian,
We're
you'll
doing
have
it.
one game will be coming out.
That's actually a really good point. Like Death Stranding, the original one, and we just did the episode about it. Like it definitely had its things about it for sure. But like you can't say that game wasn't trying shit.
Definitely.
Like it was definitely trying to do some stuff.
When I was playing it, I was thinking of you because I knew that you were a Kojima guy,
Yeah.
and I was like, there's so much weird crap happening here. Brian's going to be all over all this.
Yeah, big time.
And you were.
Yeah, and I'm with you though. I'm really excited about that game. And as we wind down Xbox talk, I want to maybe
Xbox.
I want to briefly talk about like how maybe they can correct course if that's even a possibility. But you bring up Kojima. He's a guy that can do it. He's got the sauce to make it happen, and he did it with Death Stranding. I think he's going to continue doing it with Death Stranding too. Is there any game out there for you that, and I promise not to pick on you, but is there any game out there for you that you see that's coming specifically to Xbox if you can? I know that's hard and that's kind of part of the problem. But is there something that you see that gives you any ray of sunshine, any ray of hope?
Absolutely. And it's my predicted game of the year.
Mm-hmm.
It is Hellblade 2.
Hellblade 2, that's right.
And
you
it's coming.
You love that stuff.
And it's coming out, I think, in June. June's the release date.
Yeah.
And man, if that game shits the bed, then put a fork in Microsoft. They're done. Because that game got announced when the Xbox Series X got announced a year before it actually came out. That thing's been in development for a long time. The first game was great. I have predicted that it's going to be the game of the year, and that's the only prediction that should matter.
Right.
And so,
obviously, yeah.
So if that comes out and does not live up to the hype, then we are in deep, deep trouble. But to answer your question, yeah, Hellblade 2, everyone, that's going to be the game that's going to save Microsoft. We hope.
Big, lofty goals for you. I'm not going to take anything away from you. I will politely say I disagree. But
How dare you again?
you're right. But for me, like the honest answer is like I don't know. I haven't seen anything that like aside. I really liked what they were doing with the new Fable game, but I don't know if that game's ever actually going to come out. Because here's the deal: if you look at like, let's talk about precedent a little bit. So the original Xbox comes out, and it was basically like a proof of concept. Microsoft pretty quickly got off of the original Xbox and onto the 360. I think the lifespan was like under 5 years, if I remember correctly, because the 360 came out in 2005.
01 to 05, maybe,
Yeah.
feels like.
And exactly. So what's to say that Microsoft doesn't, just picking a random idea out of the sky, the Steam Deck's a cool thing. Microsoft has a lot of money. What if the next Xbox is kind of like a Steam Deck? And
I feel like they're going to do that, by the way.
I do too. But I mean, but my point is like a game like Fable, where like you could tell like it's probably going to be worked on for a bit to go. Like that game could come out on the next Xbox. Like I'm saying, perhaps this current what's it called? Like generation of Xbox could be one that's quickly moved away from. And if that does happen, then a lot of the development that's happening right now would be, pushed into the future.
Well, if that does happen, it's really too bad because it's not the fault of the hardware. They did their hardware guys.
I think the hardware's great. I love it.
Their hardware guys did exactly what they should have done with the hardware. It's just the games. And Phil Spencer gets a lot of, I don't want to say credit in the gaming community, but he sort of like holds himself out as like, hey, I'm a gamer too.
I'm just like you guys.
Yeah, and he's got like the t-shirt and sport coat thing going on, and it's like, okay, guy, but you should know what good games are then, and you own enough studios that how hard is it for you to just go around to those studios and figure out if their games are good or not?
I mean, that's the rumor about Redfall. The rumor about Redfall is like they did like they took a look at it a little too late, and they were kind of like, well, we got to, I guess we have to release this game.
But there's no excuse for Starfield then, because Starfield was really early on when Microsoft bought Bethesda, and they would have been able to see that through.
For me, then the reason for Starfield, in my opinion, happened the way it did is because and it goes back to my earlier point. There's complacency in design of video games right now.
Yeah.
Like you look at Starfield and it's just Skyrim, but with sci-fi.
That's what everybody
says. That's all it is, man. And there's nothing innovative about that at all.
Yep.
But I could see a bunch of suits, a bunch of management and executive types that see it and go, "Oh, this is going to be the one," and then they come out and it performed the way that it performed.
Because what you just described as a bug, they see as a feature.
Right.
Imagine in the boardroom, it's like it's Skyrim, but in space.
Exactly.
And gamers are like, ugh. But then the boardroom is like, oh well, Skyrim sold like 100 billion copies, so of course
this will obviously happen again.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. We'll come back. We're gonna come back and we're gonna do this exact same dissection, but we're gonna do it with Sony this time. Let's check in with Corey one more time. Looks like he is on the inside, and he's gonna get these. He's gonna rollerblade his way to victory, and that's all we can ask of him. Right. So join us on the next one when we talk a little bit about how PlayStation's also currently shitting the bed.
Can you end on my camera?
Oh, let me do that. Oh man. What are you gonna do?